Hi, welcome back to the EPC Teardown Guides. Today we're going to be checking out the Galaxy Z Flip 3. With the flexible inner screen and outer screens, it can be a little complicated, but let's get right into it. What I like to do after we're done heating up the device is remove the upper outer screen first. Now, to do that, what you're going to need is a nice spudger and some isopropyl alcohol to break down the adhesive. Once we're done heating up the device, what I like to do is I like to get a little bit of isopropyl and put it on the right and left sides. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So once that's behind the glass here, you can go ahead and get your spudger, push it into the side, and slowly lift up that screen. So if you encounter any resistance, just make sure that you're going thoroughly and evenly without pushing too deep. What you're feeling is the adhesive slowly pushing away from the frame. That's exactly what you want. Once that adhesive is up, you want to lift it towards that outer screen and be very careful as to not damage the flex between that outer screen and the board. You also want to be careful to not touch the back of this LCD, or else you might damage the picture. So once we're here, you can either choose to hold, or what I like to do is set up a guide for this to lean against. Once that, just a little bit more of that is released, just a little bit more adhesive that needs to get picked up. There we are. Okay, so from here, our main goal is to remove this bracket and disconnect the battery. So let's do that right away. What you're going to need are 000 Phillips head screws. I have one right here. And we'll just go ahead and remove this bracket. There are 2 screws connecting it, so it's fairly simple. And once that is up, you will be able to disconnect that battery. Now make sure that your screws are well organized so you don't misplace anything. And also make sure to use plastic spudgers when disconnecting ribbon cables so you don't damage any connections. So this is the battery flex. What's interesting about these models is that there are actually 2 batteries, so be aware of that whenever you're doing outer display work. Today we're just going to be removing some boards. So you'll also notice this protective piece here. All this does is make sure that everything is kept down if your device is getting shaken around a lot. So we'll just go ahead and lift that up with a little bit of isopropyl. I prefer to use isopropyl on my tools in cases like this, because let's say, for example, you're using 70%. If you end up putting too much isopropyl on those connections, you may just short something out. Slowly but surely, we'll just go ahead and disconnect each of those cables. You can also go from the back end, following up behind, just gently lift from the back. Also disconnect this antenna here. Yep, so this is me just releasing this here. Let's get some more alcohol. All right, and now we have everything from the board disconnected, including the battery. All right, what we'll do now is disconnect this outer flex. To do that, we'll be removing the 6 screws connected to the upper board. Again, all we'll need is that 000 Phillips head, and we should be able to get it all removed. So a unique element that you may encounter are the magnets attached to the frame. This is one of the few devices that actually have magnets on them, and that's to keep the lid closed whenever you're working on the device. Shouldn't damage anything, and you won't necessarily need to remove them. It's just something to be aware of as you disassemble. Okay, now that that bracket has been unscrewed, what we're going to do is we'll just gently push it up. So what you'll notice is that there are actually arrows on these brackets that tell you exactly where you need to push. So we'll just go ahead and follow those, and it should come right up. I may need something a little stronger. For that, I'll be using a small prying tool. There's one side. All right, and as you remove this, just be aware that this is actually being fed through a small hole on this. So if you move it too quickly, you may just damage that ribbon cable. And as you can see here, you can just slide it through. All right, so we'll just go ahead and put that to the side for now and work on that main board, now that we know that this isn't going to be getting in our way. So next, what we'll need to do is remove the two antennas here and here so we can get access to that battery. Now we've already removed one screw for this antenna by removing that first upper bracket. Now, whenever you're removing antennas, just be aware that there is a small strip of adhesive gluing the antenna to the bottom of the frame. So if it doesn't start immediately lifting up, give it a little pressure and it should lift just fine. Now, in the case that you do end up breaking these, I've seen it happen before, this won't damage anything, any functionality to the antenna. You'll just have to be aware that you'll only be seated to the housing with one screw and the adhesive on the bottom. Isopropyl on both sides. And we'll just be going from one side to the other, slowly pushing it away from the housing. All right, so in cases like this, where the adhesive has started to, where the heat from our heat pad has started to dissipate and the adhesive is set again, this is a great opportunity to put it back on the heat pad and let everything loosen up. So just go ahead and do that for a minute or so. While the device is waiting, I can go ahead and follow through what some of these cables are. So these are some of the leading cables that go directly to the outer LCD. And these here are for the antenna, battery flex. They connect directly to the bottom of the board here. And the only other things that we'll need to remove this board is this camera and these outer cameras here to make sure that they don't get scratched up during the removal process. So let's go ahead and do that now. Personally, I like to keep my cameras set on microfibers with the cables, specifically with the cables off of them. We don't want any of that static electricity damaging anything, but we also don't want our work table to scratch up these delicate cameras. They are made of sapphire, which helps anything from cracking or significantly scratching, but you can also smudge them really easily. It's hard to tell until after the repair is completed. So there's also adhesive going around the entirety of the housing here that will keep that seated. One of the better ways of removing those adhesives is a lot of heat and a very, very small toothpick, just to be able to lift it up. So I'm going to find a tool that would work well for that. So my goal here isn't to wedge out the camera. It isn't to try to push anything. What I'm doing is I'm just slowly moving that adhesive from the side. I'm not trying to touch the camera at all. And that will help give me the not only less adhesive to act against me, but also a better leverage to slowly push out that first camera. I'm just going to take that camera and move it directly to our microfiber cloth. And that outer board should lift up just fine. So Samsung actually gives you a great place to get leverage in this gap in the housing right here. It's away from any delicate circuits aside from this here, but it should be just fine as we slowly push it up and out of the housing. And then once that's pushed up, I'm going to go to this side, avoiding this delicate flex cable here connecting to our side buttons.
Speak up just a bit more.
Sorry.
Good.
Yep, and we'll slowly push up that second half of the main board, and we should be good. Now, before we start replacing anything, it's good to know that our flex cables for these cameras are going to be right here and here. I want to remove those immediately before they get scuffed or smudged. To do that, I'll just go ahead and push it into our, there's one. And here is our second. And boom. And there's our first upper board. Okay. So now that that's been sitting on our heat pad for a little bit longer, I'm just going to go ahead and start the process of removing this battery by taking out this second antenna. I can already tell that that is a little bit more flexible. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Take this, a little bit more into there. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the back of the battery. So you can easily identify where the back and front is based off of this ribbon cable. You don't want to do it near the ribbon cable due to most of the processing being right here on the battery. So we'll just go ahead and focus on this end for removal. Now, here, to make our jobs a little bit easier, just remove this second bracket. So what we're going to do is we'll just be removing this second bracket and this here. So we'll just be I wouldn't recommend fully removing this from the frame. All we'll need to do is just make sure that this flex cable is out of our way during the battery removal. We can do that by simply moving this strip away from it. Again, this here is just acts like a sticker to keep down all of the ribbon cables when it's fully assembled. So you don't want to rip the sticker, but you can gladly remove it. And there we are. Let's go ahead and lift that up and away. And that gives us some more room for leverage. So just because I don't think I'm getting enough leverage or purchasing power behind that battery, I'm going to use something a little bit stiffer, a little bit bigger, just to make sure I can get everything I need. That also should be just fine at coming in at the sides and helping to remove some of the adhesive across the battery. I'm just working this back and forth between the housing and the battery, trying to avoid this here and, of course, these other ribbon cables. And there we are. First battery removed. Now let's focus on this lower half. All right, so after a few minutes of letting it heat up, what we're going to do is we're going to start removing this bottom back glass. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some isopropyl alcohol all around our edges here. And we can start by removing it from the bottom here. So we're going to go ahead and start from the right side, slowly pushing our spudger through. Again, you don't want to get too deep behind this back glass because we don't want to cut any important ribbon cables. Okay, and what I like to do now that I'm at a corner is go ahead and slip something like that, just so I know that adhesive isn't going to reset as we go across the rest of this back glass. Okay, we're going to use where we had that corner to slowly push up and use our plastic to remove any of that adhesive that may still be pushing our lower glass down. Yep, the only thing keeping it down now is adhesive, so we'll just go ahead and peel it right up. All right, so what you're looking at now, it may be a little bit more obscured, but we have the wireless charging flex, which is connected to a ribbon cable underneath this bracket. All right, I'm actually just going to go ahead and remove the rest of that adhesive from the back glass. You can always readhere it later. Just go ahead and get all of that out of the way for us. Okay, we'll just go ahead and remove these connected flexes. And you'll notice that the only other thing keeping this down is, let's see, another connection underneath the board here, and some adhesive here and here. What we're going to do next is remove these 5 screws on the lower bracket here. Okay, and once that's up, we will push from the arrow here, and that should come right up. And now we have that lower battery revealed. So this is our lower board. We've already unscrewed one of the connections there by removing that first bracket. We'll just go ahead and unscrew that second, and that should be the board. Underneath that is the vibrate motor. Now, these boards are typically kept in place with a little bit of adhesive around the charge port, but adhesive isn't there to necessarily, Adhesive isn't there to necessarily keep it down. It's just to help this seal from water getting in. There's another connection at the bottom of this lower main board. We'll just remove that. And that's all completed. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move this out of our way and work on removing this lower battery here. Also, while we're down here, we can go ahead and remove that haptic motor. These haptic motors are nothing delicate, so I just like to use, I'll use something a little smaller. I just like to use a flathead to pry that open. That'll be right here. So you always know where you can push against it. There will be a small indentation underneath. And boom. Just like that. Again, magnets. Something very unique to this device. And what we're going to do is we're going to put some isopropyl alcohol around the edges of this battery and let it heat up for another minute or so. All right, now that we've let that heat up for a few minutes, let's try disassembling the battery. Again, we'll just go ahead and lift these flex cables out of our way, and we can pry up from this end here. Again, a little bit of isopropyl alcohol goes a long way. I'm going to be using a stiff card for this. Luckily, this gives me just enough space to leverage and get as much as I can underneath that battery. Because this battery is a little bit bigger, gives you a lot more wiggle room to get underneath it and push that battery up and away from the housing. And that's how you tear down a Galaxy Z Flip 3.
Don't feel like doing a teardown yourself? Have not just one, but hundreds of devices taking up space? EPC is a global leader in the ITAD field, and it's our goal to reduce e-waste and give devices a second chance. Reach out to us today to learn more.